Okay, guys. So I'm gonna start off the webinar here. Once again, an apology. But despite all that, we do have a very exciting webinar ahead of us. Today, we're going to be talking about engaging the private sector in remote areas, which is one of two webinars in a series looking at facilitating change in Finn markets. Before we dive in, I'd like to go over a few ground rules that you all might have got on top of already. In the display on the right-hand side, there's several functionalities. One is the chat area. So it'd be great if you guys could go into the chat area and if you could introduce yourselves there. So if you click on chat and then just say send a message to all participants, and if you could say your name, where you're coming from, which country you're in, something about how you work in Finn markets, that would be really great. I can see people are starting to do that now. If you have any IT questions in that chat area, could you go to send to and send it to SEEP Network, and they'll help you with any IT issues. If you have any specific questions about a presentation you heard, a slide, something very specific to one of the presentations, if you could go in that chat area and send it to the presenter. If you have any more general questions, we'll have some time, though perhaps a bit closed down now, unfortunately, but we'll have some time at the end to go over the questions and answers there. So rather than sending it in the chat area, if you could click on the Q&A, there's a question mark, and send it there. There will be a survey at the end of this webinar. I'd be very grateful if you could fill that in. And big thanks to the SEEP Network for making this all possible. So today we are going to start on a slightly philosophical tone on why we're all here, then asking what do we mean by Finn markets. We'll then explore to some extent what the programs are doing, the challenges they face, and then how they're addressing these, followed by Q&A. If that session is quite small on Q&A, the second webinar, of course, will have much more time. It'll be more of a discussion area for this. So why are we all here? Well, I probably don't need to say it to most of you, but increasingly we're working in these difficult, challenging environments, pushed by donor pressure for us to think more about those in more severe poverty, rising incomes in a number of countries. So we're working more in remote areas, in conflict-affected environments, in corrupt areas. So I think these two webinars are very timely. So we're going to be looking at some of the emerging good practice here, but we're also going to ask what is feasible. Should our expectations perhaps be a bit less, or what kind of realism fits in? So this is one of two webinars. The next one is a week today on is crowding in mission impossible. So great to have you guys there as well. But if there's interest in looking at this further, if other people want to share their voice, I think we, Beam, SEEP, others are very keen to look at this more. So you should see on the right-hand side, we have a couple of questions for you. And it'd be grateful if as I'm speaking, if you could fill these in, just yes or no. So you'll see on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, under a drop-down of polling. So do you work in markets where producers are really far away? Do you work in markets where there is very little infrastructure? Are you working in markets where market actors do not trust each other? Is corruption rife? Is it easy for you to find examples of programs of good practice in these areas? And are you excited by this webinar series? So I'll give everyone just 1 minute to fill that in, and then we'll take it from there. So do you work, and I'll now speak for people listening to recording can hear this as well. Do you work in markets where producers are far away? The majority of people is very much yes. Are you working in markets where there's very little infrastructure again? Again, there's 22 people saying yes, 3 people saying no. Do you work in markets where market actors don't trust each other? A bit less, but still 20 people saying yes, 3 saying no. Corruption is very high, 22 saying yes. Can you find examples of programs, approaches to working in these areas? I think most of you are saying there's something out there. Some are saying no. And are you excited by this webinar series? Well, that's the most important one. 24 people saying yes, none saying no. So, well, that's very kind of you all. Okay, so we're going to come on to our speakers in a bit, but I think a lot of you are working in very similar environments to our speakers, and hopefully we'll get a lot out of this. Just going into our speakers, we have, well, I'm Ashley Aarons, the moderator. I work for Beam Exchange, a knowledge platform funded by DFID and SDC to support programs that are using market systems approaches. You see these photos here. We have Sven Gehlhaar, rural markets in Bolivia, Philipp Lehne and ÉLAN RDC in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Jeton Starova with Mercy Corps Prime program in the US. Sorry, USAID funded in Ethiopia. They'll all have a chance to introduce themselves shortly, but I'd like to be clear, you have their email addresses there. I'm sure they'd love if you contacted them with any ideas for collaboration, any questions you have, so please feel free to make use of that. So I want to go over now and I want to ask our programs, in your own words, what do you mean, what do spin markets mean to you? And I'll pass over to Sven first.
Hello everybody, Sven speaking from Bolivia, from the Rural Markets Project. What I'm giving here is not a scientific definition, but shows some of the characteristics of thin markets, as you can see on the slide. For instance, the general conditions of a region characterized by thin markets might be quite challenging. I'm referring to, for instance, tough climate, weather, or geographical conditions. A second aspect is poor infrastructure availability. This makes production, transformation, transport, and selling a hard thing to do, actually. This point, together with high distances between populations and therefore between markets, will have severe effects on, for instance, production costs that might be higher than elsewhere and low under such circumstances. All this might lead to strong migration tendencies and reducing the availability of goods and services even more. At the end, you can see it on the right of my slide, you get a real demand supply problem. Next.
Yeah, hello everybody, from Philipp, working for ÉLAN RDC project in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, what do thin markets mean for us in a project about river transport that I'm talking a bit about today? So seen from Equator province, Kinshasa is the main market for smallholders, but it can only be reached by river transport. So this is basically traders who work on this transport link, and they trade agricultural goods, but physical distance and high fuel costs and also rent extraction make transport very expensive and very risky. Talking about rent extraction, for example, there were 59 perceptions, more or less illegally, were found by a public-private stakeholder process recently in DRC, and 38 of them are now declared illegally, but it still remains difficult to actually implement the law here. So this kind of factors contributing to expensive transport limit demand for agricultural products, and this reduce the incentives for farmers to produce. So we still see many subsistence farmers due to that in Equator province. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Philip. This is Jeton speaking from Ethiopia. Now, to answer this question, what thin and nascent markets mean to us as a project and as an agency, we have no definition, and I don't think that there is a standard definition across the world. So while you're looking at the slide that we have prepared, let me give you a few opinions how we think about them. Since we are all in development and we are identifying the potential value chains that would be perspective in a certain market chain, what we want to look into, what we define as a thin market generally, is those markets that we would engage with. They have a potential growth, but they wouldn't realize that growth without a concentrated assistance. Now, a similar term to that one, and it's what usually people refer to as a thin market when they speak about markets, is something that we more call nascent markets, basically, as opposed to developed markets. And these are the characteristics. They are usually remote, they are with small numbers of development, both of the rules and the actors of the market, and they are lacking all kinds of services, supporting services, including infrastructure. Now, the nascent markets really do not necessarily face demand and supply problems, so they can be thick or thin at times, but what is characteristic for them, they lack everything that is needed for the development of the entire market.
So thanks very much to all of our speakers there. I really like those three explanations. There are some differences, but the similarities are very strong. We're talking about markets with few transactions, with limited demand or supply, depending on the context, and that's often due to them being very remote, little infrastructure. And I like as well very much what Prime are doing here, which is presenting, I guess, a new approach, a new nuance to looking at the differences within these markets, rather than just use a blanket name. We don't have time to have a further discussion on the definitions, but we have started a conversation on LinkedIn, very much on this definition, this idea of nascent markets. It'd be great if you could add your thoughts there, and we will send around a link to that discussion later on. But I want to go on now to some of the programs here. And I feel at BeamNet, we've purposely gone out and spoken to 3 programs that we think really have a lot to share about working in thin markets. And so now they're going to present that, and you will see very much that thin markets is very core, operating in thin markets is very core to what they're doing on a very regular basis. So I'll pass you over now to Jeton, first of all.
Okay, thank you, Philip. Well, the Prime project is one of the series of the complex projects, as we refer to, because they are complex in terms of geography, number of partners, number of objectives, and different local government and different local governments that we work in. So, the Horn of Africa, where this project is implemented, is an area that is known for recurrent droughts, recurrent human-induced crisis, and it is a pretty challenging environment for many years, not being an object of economic and social development, but more object of relief type of assistance. Now, our project is a $62 million Feed the Future initiative. The general objective is reduce poverty and hunger and increase resilience to climate change, because part of our funding comes from the climate change initiative. And it is implemented by Mercy Corps-led consortium of 10 NGOs and universities, some international, some local. It is implemented in the 3 federal states of the Ethiopian Federation. The guiding principles are no different than the guiding principles of any facilitative development activity. We do want to be on, not to do things, but to support people doing things. We are striving to achieve scale in order to stretch the resources that we have to more geography and to more value chains. We are trying to be innovative, responsive to the context, because, as I mentioned, we are pretty often interrupted by local or larger drought crisis in the development activities. Multi-stakeholder resource management really means that we are trying to build on the experiences, expertise, and the strengths of our 9 partners. Improving household nutrition is a very important part of our thinking whenever we design activities, because we are, again, Feed the Future USAID initiative. Now, these are the components of Prime. I will not go through all of them. You can look at them. It's part of our complexity. Those that are in red printing are the economic development components. Basically, livestock is the predominant activity of majority of the households in those areas. But with the changing environment, increasing opportunities, and reducing natural resources, we have a lot of people that transition out of pastoralism that seek employment in the new established and now developing urban areas in that area, in Ethiopia, and of course globally. Innovation Investment Fund is also part of the economic development objectives, as
Hello, yes, again, rural markets project in Bolivia. It's Bolivia in South America, of course, and we implement the project as a leader of consortium together with our local partner, which is the Foundation Profit, and together with 4 national facilitators. It's a STC finance project, which is the Swiss Development Corporation. We have for the first phase, we have $11.5 million, and we work actually to the MSD or former M4P approach. As you can see on the slide, we work under the roof of inclusive markets development, and there we have 3 pillars. On the left-hand side, you can see the work development of and access to markets. In the middle, we work in development of and access to financial markets, and the third pillar is improving the business environment. As transversal issues, you can see on the bottom, we work in economic empowerment of women and regional development. Next. This is a small map of Bolivia. We work in this shaded area, mostly in tuppers, in vegetables, fruits, regional development, and the left-hand side you can see we work in dairy. Dairy, we work especially in the Altiplano. We have a small photo down there, and I just want to mention a little bit about the Altiplano of Bolivia. You see, the Altiplano of Bolivia is at around 4,000 meters above sea level. And it's actually a very thin market area, and it has a quite challenging environment too, which can be characterized, among others, by features such as a rough climate and arid soils, dispersed settlement patterns, meaning that few villages in small cities are quite distant from each other. Road density is very low and other important infrastructure poorly developed. Smallholder farming predominates, as most farmers live from 1 or maximum 2 hectares of arid land, and having on average 8 cows. And if this was not enough, normally this land is not owned in one piece, but rather patched together over great distances, which makes even a medium level of use of technology for production almost impossible. Further on, the average age is very high, as young people migrate to cities, holding only loose ties to their communities. Such rather informal markets are characterized through, for instance, that fresh milk is collected by some small medium enterprises in some areas, but in other areas not. Thus, small farmers have to get their little produce themselves under high costs, normally, to a nearby collection center or transform the milk into fresh cheese that can be sold on informal markets or along the main road.
Thank you very much, Sven. At the 2 other projects we have heard about, ÉLAN RDC also works with geographic diversity. So this is in several provinces of ÉLAN RDC. ÉLAN RDC applies the M4P approach. It's a $50 million program over 5 years that is until the end of 2018. Currently has 5 regional offices and staff of 40 people around. The aim of ÉLAN RDC is to improve the way markets work in the DRC so as to increase the incomes of, in the end, by 2020, over 1 million low-income men and women. So this is really approaching a lot of people. To do so, we partner with and we provide expertise to market actors as businesses, financial institutions, and industry associations. Our program designs and facilitates sustainable and innovative industry changes so that they will be introduced and build a more efficient and more inclusive economy. Next, please. To do so, we focus on 4 pillars. This is agro inputs and training, that is market access and market development, access to finance, and a business enabling environment. To give you some examples of Equator province, where I work, for example, we motivate agro input providers to invest in market opportunities And we also facilitate cocoa export through a collateral management agreement. Today, talking about river transport, I'll talk about the flagship activity of ÉLAN RDC. Here, the market system change that we are working towards is to boost sales of agricultural products through improving trader-transporter coordination. So that means a better cooperation between these two key actors. Thank you very much. And next should be Ashley.
So thanks very much. It's really great to learn more about the programs, and we will be exploring a bit more what the programs do in the second webinar. So definitely bear in mind everything you've heard today. So I want to ask our speakers now, if you were forced to, say, focus on just one challenge working in the areas you're working in these fin markets, what would that one biggest challenge be? So I'll pass over to Jeton first of all.
Thank you, Ashley. Well, of course, the challenges are great and multiple. But if we look at the challenges and we look at all the value chains that the project is trying to work with, starting with the livestock value chain and then animal health products and services value chain, dairy value chain, and so on and so forth, the underlying challenge for all industries is the access to finance. So that's why in this presentation we chose to speak about access to finance, because while the nascent market actors in the areas in which we work do have a wish and the market opportunity to grow, their ability is constrained to grow as fast as we would like them to and as fast as they would like to because of lack of access to finance. Several things contribute to that lack. Infrastructure is one. Limited amounts of finance. People that know Ethiopia know that in Ethiopia, financial markets are pretty controlled. They are not very liberalized. Foreign investment in the financial market is impossible. It's prohibited by law, etc. And then, in the reality of the regions in which we work, we have a poor financial literacy of both consumers, let's say household members, and even the nascent market actors that are appearing do not have the exposure. On the other hand, financial institutions are, as everywhere in the world, very risk-averse when it comes to lending and offering service in the rural areas. So they just currently, in majority of the cases, and before the project started in the last years, we're focusing on social transfers, salaries for the governmental officials working there, and foreign remittances that come. Very little saving and lending products were available and are still available. On top of everything, these areas are Muslim predominantly, some areas even 99%, so that ranges. So Sharia-compliant banking services are something that is very important and on which we are focusing very much, of course, in concert with the market actors, the banking sector, the microfinance sector, and also the Ethiopian government.
For us in the Rural Markets Project in Bolivia, we have as well quite some challenges, but I would like to mention these two I put there on the slide. As you have heard, regions of thin agricultural markets can be characterized by a few formal enterprises and other market stakeholders. And a lot of the weakly organized smallholder farmers that live dispersed and often with one foot in a bigger city. That means if you want to work there, you have to engage with a lot of poorly connected, rather weak stakeholders than with few strong ones. Additionally, these stakeholders very often have already received a big deal of traditional and international development cooperation and or benefited from top-down development projects from local or central governments. That's why it might become quite a challenge to explain in an easy way to these stakeholders, such as small local businesses, farmer associations, or universities, how the MSD or M4P approach actually works. and of course, a challenge to convince them about its virtues, obviously. At the end, not all of the businesses you can convince to collaborate with the project. For instance, engagement because engagement of the private sector partner will take up additional time of the entrepreneur, and own resources have to be put in, with often no immediate benefit.
I can only subscribe what Jeton said in the beginning. Challenges are multiple, and access to finance for sure is a big one. What we found as the biggest one, and somewhat underlying in RDC, was a lack of trust. So I told you we work in river transport, and river transport is just part of the supply chain, of the value chain. So this connects to the production of food crops, staple crops, and to the aggregation of staple crops before they reach actually the port. So it's very much about linkages between farmers and traders, linkage between trader and river transporters. So there's mistrust, there is a lack of information, this causes fragmentation, and in general, it's an unequal access to information. So some know more than others and also try to profit from it. The result, farmers sell to fragmented traders who are often not very big, particularly not in the Bazancuso example, of which I will talk later a bit. River transporters do not know where they are needed because they do not know where they will find products to take. And as a result, they hesitate to do the voyage, and this results in a shortage of boats. It results on products rotting because they do not find boats, and overall it increases the risk in the market, and it decreases the prices for the farmers. Thank you, and back to Ashley.
Well, thanks very much, Joel, again. I think that Jeton's quote of challenges are great and multiple may be one we referred back to several times. I think all the challenges here, I think all the speakers would resonate with each of them. But I do like how different challenges are being brought out by different people. We have low access to financial services, expectations for direct support, a mistrust between the market players. And what's interesting to me as an observer in this is that these are not radically different problems to what you might call thick markets, but rather it's the intensity that's different, and some of the underlying factors that cause them are bigger. So Philipp's talking about distrust, and one element of that is lack of information, which is very much exacerbated by the remoteness of certain areas. So I think that the challenges are similar to other markets, but it's the intensity of the challenge that really strikes me. I don't know if we'll have a chance for this later on, but now I want to move over to how this is being addressed. So this is the chance for our speakers to really earn their keep. So first of all, we're going to go over to Jeton.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Well, what are the prime efforts in addressing that major challenge, one of many? We, again, following the principles of the implementation, we treat the financial products and the need for financial services as the market, basically a demand and supply need. And we look from the aspect of the financial market system, just like any market system. So what we're trying to do is facilitate, assist the financial institutions to develop in those areas. And they exist on several levels currently in Ethiopia. We have commercial banks, we have the NFIs, we have rural saving and loan unions, and we have the informal village savings and loan associations. Each of those either registered or a formalized institution or a grassroots institution that in the future may, from the VSLA, move into a RISACO registration phase, and further on, as years evolve, go up the scale, will have its own development, sort of a life in development. So we try to look at them as market actors. We do offer technical assistance to the microfinance institutions and commercial banks for developing appropriate banking products for the context of the value chains and the regions in which we work. So we have several products that we assisted them develop and roll out, such as loans for livestock traders, very specific type of a working capital loan. Then we also assist the MFIs increase their mobile banking capabilities. So we have a product that are rolled out and also assisted them in develop their mobile banking agents. On the other hand, on the demand side, we work with the small businesses to increase their demand and ability to be serviced, their bankability to be serviced by the banking institutions. We do offer them small business grants, development grants, which is 100% only used for fixed and one-off cost coverage in the expansion of their business, but by in that way making them more bankable because their financial and business soundness becomes more something towards the banks and MFIs look into. We do offer technical assistance to those small businesses as well. I was mentioning the increasing of the financial literacy, all with the goal to make them more attractive as clients for the financial institutions. And then, of course, the facilitation of market linkages for the support of small business expansion and technical assistance recipients. So by this, again, we are trying to make the market for financial services more palatable, more attractive for the financial institutions, those that are established, and also where grassroots develop the community financial institutions that in turn some of them in turns may in the future develop to.
I would like to give you some tips on how your work can work better in thin market regions. The first point I would like to stress is managing expectations. What do I mean with that? Before engaging with the stakeholder, the project should be quite clear about what it wants actually, and how the business, farmer cooperative, etc., can quickly profit from the intervention. This is especially important in thin markets where you can find very often a general culture of mistrust, as mentioned before, among stakeholders and towards new actors, which can be the project itself. Another point I would like to stress is providing immediate benefits. The project should have mechanisms to provide such immediate benefits to potential partners. For example, through incentives. For example, one of our implementing partners, for example, has a market intelligence system in place, which once you have subscribed to it, provides market prices of the products you are interested in on a daily basis. To subscribe a business to that system might work as a suitable hook to get engaged with the potential partner. Another good example for us is capacity building. For example, we have set up some certificate programs with local universities that have interested quite a lot of the entrepreneurs we have engaged with. You might hook up some of them by offering some kind of scholarship to these certificate programs. Another incentive could be, for example, if you give a small or medium business a helping hand for making new business links or exploring new markets. Yeah? Here we help, for example, some businesses in carrying out a market study. The third point I would like to stress is trust building measures. There are quite a lot of ways to build up trust with local stakeholders, but I think some very simple ones are, for example, to engage in doing local trade fairs, or informing about the purpose of your project via local radio or TV programs or the short spots. The last point I would like to stress, which for us is very important, is engaging with the public sector. We found it quite viable to first engage with the local authorities and after that engaging with the private sector. Because you see, the private sector very often has a quite difficult time with the public sector. So you can actually work as a nexus between both of them. And here in Bolivia, this is approved quite well. So in the first place, you sit together with the public sector stakeholder. You come to agreement about what you want to work with them. You set up a working agenda, and then hopefully you get this nexus going on.
I talked about supply chains. Our vision for the river transport is that viable logistic systems will be in place. This should work through information and through advanced agreements between, on the one hand, traders and transporters, and where necessary also between traders and buyers. Buyers typically several hundred kilometers away in the city. So private sector partners develop a new business model. This is a business model which uses advanced contracting. Traders and transporters did this because they saw a win-win situation from increasing coordination. So what was this about? On the pictures on the right-hand side, you see on top, you see a trader who has some ice to sail. On the other hand, she has not enough maize to sail to make a boat come and pick up her maize. So on the lower hand, you have what we call a focal point. This is a person trusted by all actors in this particular market, who collects information, typically by mobile phone. And this person can then calculate how much product is on the market and needs a transport, and can find a river transport for this certain amount. So this helps to solve the problem that traders do not know if a boat and when a boat will come, and boat operators do not know if when they go, they will find something to take. A win-win in this case. Here we see it in a bit a broader picture between 1 and 2. Let's start from the top left. There you see groups of traders. In our Bazancuso pilot, this is about 50 small traders. We also work in another region there we have larger traders, so it may be 3 or 4. In any ways, they agree to work together and through a focal point organize better towards a boat operator, whom you see here in the middle. Each trader in the end signs an individual transport contract, but altogether they can fill up a boat, and this is interesting for the transporter. On the other hand, when it comes to larger volumes, contracts with agro industries, so industrial consumers, are interesting to improve cash turnover. So you do not need to sell on a retail market, which is the most important when it comes to food consumption in Kinshasa, but you can sell larger lots and increase cash turnover so that you can source and buy more products with that money quicker back where your main buying area is. Thank you very much, and back to Edwin.
So thanks very much to everyone there. And I really like those 3 presentations, again showing very connected but quite different things. So how support to financial markets goes much beyond just some grant support, really to financial ecosystem development and building up those linkages. How rural markets is working with the government and bringing that in, and how working with the public sector becomes all the more important often in thin markets. And then this very exciting work with the transport sector. I know there's some questions coming in about also working with roads. That's such an important sector, and also bringing in how you're working with ICTs as well and building up trust. And what I like about all those as well is that some issues do come out a lot about the importance of building up linkages. There's a larger number of players often to be considered, and different ways of building up trust. As you all know, we started a bit late, so things are running a bit over. If I can say we might end maybe 10 minutes late or so, gives us space for some questions. course, we'll have more questions at the next one or on LinkedIn as well. Can anyone send in some questions now? Just, if you can send them in now, we'll answer maybe 2 or 3 while we can. To kickstart that process, I want to throw out to the presenters one of the questions we already received, and that was from Sharad Rai with Mercy Corps Nepal, and there was quite a lot of interest and insights coming in from Nepal around this. But Sharad asks, in Fin markets, what are some of the proven or viable processes of identifying and engaging with the right private sector partners or collaborators? So I think we've talked a lot about engaging with the private sector, but it'd be great to ask, how are you identifying and selecting your partners? I assume in Fin markets, as you said, there's considerably fewer market actors. So if I could pass it over first of all to Philippe, how are you identifying and selecting your partners?
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Well, if I have the recipe for this already, I'd be happy, but I hope I can bring some initial thoughts which may help. So as I have mentioned in the beginning, we do face an issue of trust in the market that we address. On the other hand, we are talking about thin markets with a limited number of actors. So we don't have a proven process yet or proven processes yet. But what we generally do is to start speaking with all actors in the sectors. That may seem very difficult, but that means, for example, all traders in a particular region, and including the producer groups and public services. So this is important for us as well. We do this through just inviting for a meeting, and then we have a room with 100 people who are interested in what we are doing, and we're starting a discussion, and then it's just to see who stays on board later, who continues to contact us, who comes to a next meeting, and those who are really interested, then we start to do some background research to see whether they could become viable partners and if they could advance the idea of having better linkages in this transport system. This is then necessary for us as well, because in the end we try to facilitate contracts between them, and of course it's necessary and important for the project as well to promote models that do work. So no universal recipe yet, but basically being transparent, inviting everybody to participate, and then work with the lead actors in the sector. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Can I open that up to our other 2 speakers? Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, when it comes to the how one chooses partners in asset markets, we try to follow the book in terms of the principle. Anyone that has taken an M4P course remembers the word, work with those that have history, scale, and momentum. Now that's easier said than done in many of the cases, but in reality it very much depends on the activities that we design, which can pertain one or another part of the market actors group for that specific market. For example, we do have one type of activity where, as I mentioned it earlier, whereas we grant some financial means for small-scale cost-share business expansion. Now, that type of activity, really you cannot pick the players. Although you may know that in a certain market there are only 1 or 2 players, and then people would say, but those are the only ones that collect milk. We try to be transparent. We open it up. We try to crowd in as many people in as transparent process possible, because there may be new ones. There may be somebody in the geography that you haven't heard of. Of course, it is very much important on the startup of the project to really study well the value chain or the market system in which one is entering, because any development activity has lived in a certain period of time. There were people that worked with those market actors before, and there will be people that will be working with that after we close our doors. So one needs to have that continuum in mind. So this would be the same, some of the principles. Common sense scale and momentum and be transparent. And then people will hopefully crowd in for a specific type of an activity that they're interested in.
So maybe I add some point to Philipp and Jeton's answers. Just for me a very important point. Very often you engage with stakeholders, you do the analysis, Jeton just mentioned, but sometimes even after such analysis, the potential stakeholder or partner, you find he has actually not the institutional capacity to do what he was expected to do or what he wants even to do. Yeah. So sometimes we have found very necessary to first do some institutional capacity, to develop the institutional capacity of this partner, and only after that you can do what you agreed to do. It especially is very often important for public sector partners or for private sector partners such as universities, technical institutions, training facilities, etc. That's it from my side.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Clearly there's a lot of interest to answer some of these. As we are stretching over time, I'm just going to ask one more question to everyone. This has just come in, and I've sent around in case our speakers can't hear me too clearly. It's in the chat area. So Richard Tinsley asks, how important to assisting remote areas is a physical infrastructure, particularly roads, that will replace the costs of doing business, such as the tripling of transport costs that can easily be accounted for? So I guess you're all going to say it's very important, but it'd be nice to get some input from some of you about how you've been dealing with this cost or the problem of transport. We've heard from yourself, Philipp, about what your work, the very exciting work with the river. It'd be nice to know, in particular, from the other two speakers, how they're dealing with transport problems.
Okay, well, yes, definitely. The transportation issue is usually one of the largest issue because it represents a huge barrier from the side of the cost, from the side of reliability of the service, etc. But it really depends very much on the type of the value chain that we are working and that one is working with. For example, there are a lot of unrealistic wishes. We have, for example, in our areas, we have one niche market system, which is a dairy market system for camel milk. Now, it is not very realistic that the wishes and the ideas of the participants in that market system to sell their product routinely and successfully, let's say, in Addis Ababa or a big urban center, mainly because of the transportation issue. So basically, in that kind of a situation, one should be realistic about the market, realistic about how fast will this transportation be developed, and then choose it or not choose it as a sort of a business model to support at that given point of time, of course. So it very much depends on the value chain in which we are working. For some value chains, transportation is a bigger issue. For some value chains, the transportation is a smaller issue. If you have a very short value chain to address, which is the home consumption, household consumption of the milk that is produced in the household, you want to increase that, there is no transportation issue because the milk is produced in the household and consumed in the household. So we are actually talking about the value chain that is extremely short. I just gave it as an example, and various industries have different examples, I'm sure.
Maybe I can add something.
Yeah, please do.
You see, very often costs get very high when individual farmers or producers start transporting their produce. So there are different ways you can avoid that. For example, if you have a cooperative or association and they buy their inputs together, and from a remote area, so they hire one truck, they get all the inputs in one day to all the farmers, and they might even organize themselves to get all the input out with one truck on one specific day to the market. So you can lower costs very easily. Another point is very often we try to work directly with the farmers and encourage them to do all this transportation thing, you know. But very often it's far easier to hand this over to an intermediary who has different kinds of facilities to transport more cheaply products, because you might go into one area and go to all the farms, load his truck with all the produce, and then he gets out directly to the market. So the cost can be quite low, even if it's remote areas and bad road conditions. That's it for myself.
Very much. And Philipp, anything you'd like to add to that, or we'll draw a line underneath the questions?
Well, I've talked so much about transport already. maybe very, very short. I'm not 100% sure how I understand the question. So I've talked about river transport. This is the port is the last point of aggregation, but of course there are roads before, and the product are geographically separated. So here in our kind, it's also that intermediary, the focal point, who can help to organize it. For us as a project who also has to be present in the region, of course, it is also more difficult the more distant locations are to maintain contacts with the actors, and this favors, in our case, locations that are more easy to access. And here we more often find our first partners with whom we engage, and then from there we can spread more into the geography, which of course is difficult. Thanks.
So thanks very much. I like that last point, that brings in this element of practicality or realism as well. So thanks to you all. Quite a few more questions came through, and I'm very happy that most of those were on questions that we will be addressing in the next webinar next week. So we have from Dominique Conrad about working with monopolies, others on crowding in and working with the government. So those are all elements that we're going to be looking at next week on the webinar that focuses on is crowding in mission impossible. So I just want to say thank you so much for attending, sticking with us through all these IT issues, and thanks for the great questions. Thanks to the SEEP Network for their support here, and a big thanks, there's a clap here to our great presenters. Really grateful for your insights, and I'm sure you'll get many more emails from speakers now with questions. We are sending around some links now for you guys to fill in, but hopefully Rebecca can share through the chat area. We will send a survey. Great if you can fill that in. And also great if you can sign up to the next webinar, which will be a week today. We also mentioned there's an ongoing discussion about defining what we mean by thin markets and nascent markets. So you can see a link on your screen that should take you to that. We also have a number of other resources that have been shared by some of the speakers that we think you'd get a lot of value out of. In particular, the latest report from Prime about their approach in nascent markets is just very much hot off the press. So that leaves me with nothing more to say than, have a great day. It was great having you here, and I look forward to having this again on the next theme next week. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ash. See you later. Bye, Philipp. Jeton.
Thank you. Thank you all. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to us.
Next week. Bye-bye.
Very much. And Philipp, anything you'd like to add to that, or we'll draw a line underneath the questions?
Well, I've talked so much about transport already. maybe very, very short. I'm not 100% sure how I understand the question. So I've talked about river transport. This is the port is the last point of aggregation, but of course there are roads before, and the product are geographically separated. So here in our kind, it's also that intermediary, the focal point, who can help to organize it. For us as a project who also has to be present in the region, of course, it is also more difficult the more distant locations are to maintain contacts with the actors, and this favors, in our case, locations that are more easy to access. And here we more often find our first first partners with whom we engage, and then from there we can spread more into the geography, which of course is difficult. Thanks.
So thanks very much. I like that last point that brings in this element of practicality or realism as well. So thanks to you all. Quite a few more questions came through, and I'm very happy that most of those were on questions that we will be addressing in the next webinar next week. So we have from Dominique Conrad about working with monopolies, others on crowding in and working with the government. So those are all elements that we're going to be looking at next week on the webinar that focuses on is crowding in mission impossible. So I just want to say thank you so much for attending, sticking with us through all these IT issues, and thanks for the great questions. Thanks to the SEEP Network for their support here, and a big thanks, there's a clap here to our great presenters. Really grateful for your insights, and I'm sure you'll get many more emails from speakers now with questions. We are sending around some links now for you guys to fill in, but hopefully Rebecca can share through the chat area. We will send a survey. Great if you can fill that in. And also great if you can sign up to the next webinar, which will be a week today. We also mentioned there's an ongoing discussion about defining what we mean by thin markets and nascent markets. So you can see a link on your screen that should take you to that. We also have a number of other resources that have been shared by some of the speakers that we think you'd get a lot of value out of. In particular, the latest report from Prime about their approach in nascent markets is just very much hot off the press. So that leaves me with nothing more to say than, have a great day. It was great having you here, and I look forward to having this again on the next theme next week. Thanks very much.